Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the international edition of today's The Hindu newspaper and look at the various different topics relevant for your examination, be it for the prelims or the mains. And at the same time, we take a look at the practice questions as well, learn the art of answer writing where we can. Now, at the end of the session, I urge you to visit the Telegram channel and do attempt the multiple choice questions which can be framed from the topic and sharpen your focus and preparation for the upcoming prelims exam as well. Now, having said that, if you are interested to download the PDF of the entire session and the annotations thereby, so you can download that from the Telegram link which is provided here. Now, before we take a look into the topics, all those who are interested in shaping the preparation for civil services examination, be it for this year or the next year, in Hyderabad, we are holding one of the largest seminars for civil services where Sarmad Sir, myself and Himabindu ma'am, we will be interacting with the students one-on-one, and we shall also be talking about what to be done and what should be done by the candidates to ace the examination in first attempt. Why not to be a repeater but to a ranker in the first attempt itself? So do join us in Hyderabad at 11 a.m. on 25th of January 2025. Now let us take a look at the topics that we are going to have a discussion for today. So today in total we are going to discuss around 10 different topics. Now 6 of them slightly in detail relevant for the mains examination. Now here the first couple of topics, they are of the same subject, that is Marco Rubio meets Jaishankar and change dynamics. Both of them, they talk about the implications of the changed administration in the US and how it can impact India as well. So here we are going to discuss that in a nutshell, what can we extract out of it and what is the way forward for a country like India. So here this is relevant for your GS paper 2, GS2. In the mains examination, you can expect a question associated. The exit of bluster. Now, this is basically the incident that US or the decision by the new administration to withdraw from the Paris Agreement and the long-term impact that it can have, as well as why is it that the US is continuously and time again withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. So here, while the article does not talk about it, it is again something which has appeared in the editorial section. The article does not talk about the long-term implications on multilateral institutions, but we are going to extract that as well. So that is relevant for your GS paper 3. China's moves must recast India's critical mineral push. This is following China's and the Interior Ministry's order to expand the export control list. So that is how China is controlling the critical mineral supply in the world. So that becomes relevant again for GS1 as well as for GS3. Then the oligarchy that we see today. This is about the aspect of oligarchy and why is it present, what are the implications, and oftentimes the convergences and the cross paths which happen with democracy. So relevant for your GS paper 2, essay, in both these it will be relevant. Then is the government encouraging cross-pathy? So what is cross-pathy? We will take a look into that. That is going to be relevant for GS3. Then National Health Mission has had productive outcomes. That is something that the center has revealed. So with the help of this article, we are going to take a look into what are the major goals of the National Health Mission, what can be relevant for your prelims. Then the MSP for the crop of jute has been revised, but with the help of this article, we will take a look at the conditions required for the growth of jute, which is one of the pet areas for UPSC prelims. Hong Kong Convention, what is that convention? And India's rice exports defy curbs. So these are the topics that we are going to hold a discussion for today. Now starting with the first topic, that is where we talk about in the page 1, Marco Rubio meets Jaishankar, calls for talks with India on illegal migration. And in the editorial page, you also have another article that is change dynamics, how and why India must chart a new transactional course with the Trump administration. So let us merge these and understand the larger issue. Now, as soon as the Trump administration has taken charge, there have been a slew of measures, various different executive orders, which have not only upset the entire world order, but has sent jitters and shivers in the entire market across the globe. Now, even India, which is one of the larger economies of the world, is definitely going to be impacted. More so when we talk about the Indian immigrants moving to the US. And we have to keep one thing in mind, that this immigrant population which is in US is one of the large sources of provision of remittances to India. And those remittances, India is one of those countries which earns the maximum from those remittances. So there are certain challenges which India confronts as it moves into and transitions into the new administration. So here, let us divide this topic into three perspectives. First, what are the challenges with the new administration in general, particularly India-oriented? Then, what are India's concerns? And what is it that India should do moving ahead? So, what are the challenges with the new administration? So, the new administration embodies the America First policy. Right? The entire campaign pitch has been the America First policy, be it the usage of American energy, be it the usage of, for example, when we talk about energy, we talk about oil, right? The crude oil, shale, natural gas, all of that. Now, US is one of the largest producers of these fossil fuels, and that has happened during the Biden administration itself. So that is something which is going to increase further. Now, in every matter possible, America First policy is going to be the basic DNA, which puts the entire world order in slight jeopardy. Why? Because America, being the preeminent global power and the most major economy of the world, wields an overwhelming influence over a lot of multilateral institutions across the world. And in every case, if there is a tit-for-tat action taken, that if you don't help America, America is going to punish you in some way or the other, then we are looking at a very fractured and a polarized world order. Then aggressive tariff imposition. Now, even during the campaign times and the months following the campaign, even during that time, Donald Trump had made it a pitch, a fervent pitch, that BRICS nations in particular can expect an imposition of tariff to the rate of 100%. 100% tariff. So think about it, that, for example, goods from India, when they are being exported to the US, they can be almost twice as costly. So if the goods are twice as costly, they will lose their competitive edge. Again, this revolves back to the America First policy. Now, a country like India, which also has substantial amount of exports to the US, that is going to suffer. So this is a major problem. Now, China is also going to face the same issue. Russia is also facing the same issue, obviously. But Russia has faced this issue in various administrations in US. But in cases like India, in the previous Trump administration as well, we had those kind of veiled threats which were imposed and which were issued by the US president. So something on the same lines can be expected. Then devaluation of multilateral world order. America first and America only. Now that significantly jeopardizes the entire multilateral world order. India is a strong proponent of multilateralism. We have, after the Cold War era, post the Cold War, the world entered into a unipolar stage where you had only one preeminent superpower, that is the US. Now, after that, as the developing countries started to grow, their economic production, the per capita income started to grow. That is when all these economic powers across the world, like Germany, like India, like UK, like France, all of them started being more important. And all of them started voicing their own opinions in matters regarding to climate change, in matters associated with energy security, food security, vaccine diplomacy, ability to fight diseases, etc. As soon as Donald Trump has taken power and the administration has been in charge, US has immediately withdrawn from issues or from Paris deal and the Paris agreement. Then even the withdrawal and the backtracking from WHO. All of this indicates what? that the US participation in these, because US is one of the larger fund providers in these institutions, the withdrawal of US indicates that these agreements and these conventions and these global orders, they are a matter of joke in terms of the international execution. So the faith in multilateralism across the globe is going to go down. So tomorrow, if WHO issues a particular directive, WHO issues a particular warning, everybody will take a look at it suspiciously. And even for Paris Agreement, we will discuss that separately in another article, but that also imposes a long-term damage. So that is where this is not good for the emerging world order. Withdrawal of US from the global institutions and energy concerns. For example, till now, US has always been picky about from where do you import your energy, right? So India, when it used to import oil from Iran, US saw it as a problem. When India is importing oil from Russia, US sees it as a problem. When India had a deal with Venezuela, US sees it as a problem. So thereby, the restrictions imposed by US administration are so high in terms of where you can get the energy from. Now, with the coming of the Trump administration, that restriction is going to be further higher and the threat of sanctions are going to loom large. That means the option and the choice that the countries, energy-starved countries like India has, that option is going to be very limited. So with the restricted options that only from these places you can purchase oil, natural gas, etc., that means that there can be an expectation of increase in the prices. So increase in energy prices will automatically have a cascading effect in terms of the commodity price increase, leading to inflation in the countries. Now that inflation can have a much more devastating impact in developing countries like India as compared to the developed nations. So here it can lead to increase in oil prices. And that increase in oil price will lead to energy scarcity is one of the outcomes. Other than energy scarcity, the other outcome will be inflation. Now, India-specific problems, if we concentrate upon, what are the India-specific problems and India's concerns? So basically, when it comes to immigrants, that is the region and the portion where India is expected to lose out a lot. Basically, there has been a cancellation of birthright citizenship. That is, if you are born in US, you naturally become a US citizen. So that has been cancelled. So that means all the individuals or all the immigrants from India who were on H-1B visas and who were thinking and seeking to expand families in the US, seeking a better life for their future generation, they will be impacted. So the movement of individuals, particularly in the service sector, most of the individuals who move to the US from India, they are deployed in the service sector. So that means it will impact our service exports as well. And those service exports will have a long-term impact in terms of our current account deficit. But at the same time, it has put into jeopardy and put into risk the immigrant population, which is amongst the most well-to-do populations across the US. Then also, there has been a large-scale crackdown on irregular migration. A state of emergency has been imposed across the border areas of the US and a large-scale crackdown is being carried out. Now, amongst the various different irregular migrants, that is the migrants which come without proper documentation, who don't have documented identity, etc. Now, amongst the large-scale undocumented migrants, Indian population is very large, in the tunes of more than 7 lakh. So you can think about it that those 7 lakh population, if they are being deported as is being threatened by the US, that will impose severe challenges to the Indian administration as well. Already there are reports that the Indian government has agreed for the deportation of few thousand of the illegal Indian immigrants who have been caught in the US. So that is going to lead to a problem in our country as well. Now, threat of tariffs on the BRICS nation, which will put Indian exports at a disadvantage. And you can link it to the larger economic parameter. Indian exports at a disadvantage. Okay. Then after that, energy security is what we have discussed about. India will be impacted, and even in issues of climate change, where US has got one of the largest per capita emissions. If US backtracks from issues like the Paris Agreement, then countries like India will suffer more. Why? Because as per World Meteorological Organization, the report which it had released, that is the State of Climate in Asia 2023, as per that, India is one of those countries which has experienced the maximum events of climate change and the maximum losses due to climate change. So India being one of the top sufferers due to climate change, we have crop losses, agricultural losses, landslides, cloud bursts, floods, droughts, heat waves. There are multiple different events and outcomes of climate change that we face the brunt of. One of the largest emitters of the world, if they take a stance that we are not adhering to the rule book anymore, then what can a country like India do? So that is a major challenge that India confronts. So what is the way forward? It appears as if the entire picture is very gloomy. There is no hope left ahead. What is the way forward? What is it that India should pursue? So rather than picking on these differences and these issues of concerns, India needs to find the positions of convergences and the issues of convergences. That is where the cooperation and the coordination has to begin with. And eventually, as the cooperation level increases, then these issues automatically get ironed out. So what are the issues and the areas of convergences between India and US which are persistent now? So the first is the Quad, the grouping of Quad. Now, one of the first meetings that the new administration held was with the Quad group and the Quad summit. So thereby, you can think about it that Quad as a region or as a kind of an entire grouping for cooperation is an immense opportunity. Now, the statement issued by the Quad ministerial meet was very, very unambiguous and against China, which talked about the unilateral aggression in the Indo-Pacific region and how that poses a larger global threat. So our interests, they do converge there. There we can have increased amount of cooperation with US, right? Then free and open Indo-Pacific region, freedom of navigation principles, free trade principles. That is what US also at least officially agrees to, and what is that India also stands for. So this is again another area of convergence. Terrorism. Under the previous Trump administration, the experience was that in matters of terrorism, US did take a very hard stance. Sometimes to the extent of that being over the line, but in most of the cases, the hard line and the hard stance. So that is again one of the areas where India has no tolerance policy for terrorism. So that is where we can have some convergence. Then boost to trade volumes. US also seeks to increase the bilateral trade, and that is something that India should also seek to do. There are many areas of exports which can be enhanced and which can be explored to increase our trade volume. Already the trade volume with US is amongst the largest. So these are the regions and the areas where the coordination has to happen, and has to happen moving ahead with the new administration. Okay, so in a nutshell, the entire couple of these articles, what do they talk about? They talk about, first of all, what the new administration holds as a challenge for the rest of the world. Then second, what are India's concerns? Immigration, cancellation of birthright citizenship, imposition and the threat of tariff, energy security, climate change, etc. And what is it that going ahead we should be doing? How is it that we should be concentrating on finding the areas of convergence? I hope this is something which is understood. Now, then, before moving into the second topic, an announcement for all of you that we have come up with a special offer of 55% off on UPSC subscription, and with the condition of the assured success. So there you can get the subscription for 12 months and 18 months, and the new batch starts from 27th of January by Sarmad Mehraj Sir, and that will be the session of polity. You can use the code IAS English to further get additional discounts. Now, coming to the second topic and the second article which has appeared in the editorial section as well. An exit of bluster. Now, this is about withdrawal of the US from the Paris Agreement. Now, what is the Paris Agreement? The Paris Agreement is basically a global agreement which was arrived at in 2015 in order to cap the rising global temperature, in order to limit the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that the countries are carrying out. And thereby, the entire world should endeavor to reduce the global warming, limit the temperature to 2 degrees Celsius as compared to the pre-industrial era. That is, the temperature rise should not be more than 2 degrees Celsius as compared to the prior situation to the Industrial Revolution. And that 2 degrees Celsius cap is to be achieved by 2100. Okay. Having said that, the aim of the Paris Agreement is that not only will we achieve a cap of rise in temperature by only up till 2 degrees Celsius, but we shall endeavor and the world shall endeavor to limit that temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to the pre-industrial era. That is the global goal of the Paris Agreement. Now you see, this is so in a way paradoxical, because 2024 marked the first year when on an average across the world the temperature was 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial era. So, when we have already started witnessing the consistent rise of temperature, that is when one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases decides to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And this carves out a new record, because no country till now has withdrawn from an agreement 3 times and from a particular convention 3 times. You see, this is all a part of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Right? So this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, this talks about, and there in 1997, you had the Kyoto Protocol. This entire convention talks about limiting the global warming. Okay? Then in 1997, there was the Kyoto Protocol. And then in 2015, there was the Paris Agreement. Now, here we have to understand that when you had the Kyoto Protocol, which was ongoing, US was amongst the largest emitters. So at that point also, George W. Bush withdrew from the aspects and the requirements of the Kyoto Protocol. So US withdrew for the first time from the climate convention during the era of George W. Bush. Then, under Barack Obama's presidency, US endeavored significantly to encapsulate and also to list out the requirements of the Paris Agreement, to craft out the rule book of the Paris Agreement. What is it that the country should do? What is it that the global goal should be? Now, immediately after the signing of the Paris Agreement, when Barack Obama exited office, Donald Trump took over, US exited from the Paris Agreement then. Then as Joe Biden took over, then US joined back the Paris Agreement. As again Donald Trump takes over, US withdraws from Paris Agreement. So now, Donald Trump is the only president who has withdrawn from an agreement twice. And US is the only country which has withdrawn from an agreement thrice. Now, this is going to have a long-term damage. Why? The short-term damage, obviously, US has been taking a kind of a leadership role in crafting global policy for climate change and fight against the climate change. So there you can understand that, okay, as one of the larger economies, they can take the lead. But once you are crafting a rule book and then you yourself depart from that rule book, you yourself are not a party to the agreement anymore, then who will follow that rule book? The entire credibility of the agreement goes to the dumps. isn't it? So that is one of the major issues that US has imposed across the global order. So here, what are the impacts which the world is going to face? First of all, in the case of US, one can expect that the emissions are not going to reduce anymore. And Donald Trump has publicly stated that US seeks to expand and increase its oil production. Mind you, even during the presidency of Joe Biden, US was amongst the largest producers of oil and crude oil and natural gas in the world. Now, when Donald Trump is seeking to increase that production, immediately wherever you explore and extract crude oil and natural gas, there is an emission of methane. So methane emission is going to be damaging. Other than that, the industrial lobbies, which are very powerful and which are prominent, they don't allow any curb on emission. So that is where the emissions from the US are expected to increase. Now, if US doesn't follow the rule book and the other countries are responsible, still the problem won't be massive, isn't it? But it sets a bad example. Why? Because you see, under the entire umbrella of Convention on Climate Change, the basic principle driving global action is the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, CBDR. Now, under this principle of CBDR, developed nations are supposed to provide financial and technical assistance to the developing nations to help them mitigate and combat the issue of climate change. So developed nations are held accountable in this. Developed nations are asked to provide some financial help. But if the developed nation, and for that matter, the largest of the economy of the world, if they pull themselves back, what happens? There is an example, a precedent for the other developed nations that look, US is also not giving money. Why is it that we are being forced to give money? So that is where principle of CBDR at risk. Principle of common but differentiated responsibility at risk. Now, there will also be impact, large-scale impact in terms of the global climate. And India being one of the worst sufferers of climate change, we are going to face the brunt. So, global warming, you can expect to be exaggerated. Increases. And you would have seen this. In general, in your life also you would have seen. Remember your school days, your college days, the graduation days, any point of time. Generally, when you see the headmaster, or let's suppose even the class topper for that matter, if the class topper doesn't do the homework and is not punished, the next day nobody does the homework. If the class topper or the class monitor would frame the rule in the school days that this is what you have to follow, and he or she themselves, they don't follow it, then nobody follows it. So that setting of precedent by the US, now US had been very instrumental in the entire framing of the requirement of the Paris Agreement. That how the nationally determined contributions to be crafted, how the global stocktake has to be taken every 5 years. So US was very, very instrumental in that. Now, if US is not following the rule book, why the other countries will follow? So that releases the pressure from large emitters like China, like other countries, India also. But when we talk about per capita emission, there India is at a very low position. But overall, the other big emitters, now they will get a free hand, right? So global emissions can increase. Emissions can increase. Okay? So this is the impact, the weakening of the Paris Agreement or weakening of the trust of the convention. This is something which was already being felt in the conference of parties which was held in Baku recently, Azerbaijan. That was a conference of parties to the climate change. And various different developed countries who were expecting the Trump administration to come over, they did not put money and they did not provide pledges also, because they knew that when Trump will come over, he will withdraw. So why should I waste my money, right? So that is where the weakening of the convention has happened. Now we know the impacts. What are the way forward? Going ahead, what is it that should be done? So the way forward is simple. Now, despite the fact that US has turned out to be an irresponsible international member, other nations, the global south, which is impacted by climate change the most, global south needs to take the lead. Global south needs to take the lead. Okay? In order to not only strengthen the convention, but also the responsibility of ensuring that world is a better place to live in by the year 2100. Right? Then after that, the agreement, the Paris Agreement in itself and the clauses thereby, that needs to be followed. The conference of parties need to be made accountable for the actions. Okay, they should not be a regular meetup where no actions are taken place. This is where multilateral meetings and convergences, need to be explored. Convergences between whom? For example, India and China, they do agree on many of the issues associated with climate change and global warming. So we need to explore that. Many countries in EU share the same concern. So that is where it should be addressed together. So that is where we can take this forward. And at own level, at the national level, adherence to the nationally determined contribution which you submit to the Paris Agreement, right? So individually, the countries need to be more responsible. INDCs. Only then can we reduce the brunt of it. Because you see, there are various different reports. The Global Risk Report, when we talk about the State of Climate in Asia report by World Meteorological Organization, all of them are indicating towards the same thing. That is, Asia is facing the brunt of climate change the most, and in Asia, countries like India, they are at greater risk. So we cannot afford to relax just because one of the large players has withdrawn. We need to take climate actions of our own as well. Okay, so what is the context of the article? US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, being the largest emitter and one of the larger contributors and being the framers of the rule book. What are the impact, the long-term impact? Weakening of the convention, weakening of multilateralism, loss of trust, the loss of the principle of CBDR. That is going to be the long-term impact. Even though the next administration, let's suppose, decides to join back the Paris Agreement, but the entire world knows that as soon as that administration changes, maybe US will withdraw again. In countries like India, we don't have that. We don't have the case that with the changing of the government, we withdraw from a particular convention. We have a continuity in the foreign policy, which is not the case in US, and US foreign policy impacts the global foreign actions. So that is the long-term impact. And way forward, what needs to be done in order to get the climate action back on track. So these are the things which are relevant from the perspective of the examination. Most probably, the probability of the question being asked is in the mains exam. Okay, so here, what is the withdrawal of the US from Paris Agreement shall have long-term repercussions? Discuss. Now, how do you answer this particular question? What is it that we have to write in this? So first of all, in the intro, what do you write in the intro? Do practice this answer writing. Unless and until you are planning, you are one of those candidates whose entire goal is just to succeed in the prelims exam, and that's it. Life is successful and goal achieved. Do write or do attempt practicing the answer writing skills as well. Very, very important. So what do you write in the intro? In the intro, you talk about the Paris Agreement. what is meant by the Paris Agreement. The goal. Just talk about the larger goal. The goal is what? To basically reduce the increase in temperature to 2 degrees Celsius by reduction 2 degrees Celsius as compared to the pre-industrial era by reducing the emission of the greenhouse gases. Right? It is a part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So that mention of UNFCCC has to be necessarily done. Okay? After that, when you write the body, what do you write in the body? In the body, you start by brief mention of the requirement that every country is supposed to meet the NDCs. Country and their own INDC, intended naturally determined contributions. Now here, those intended naturally determined contributions, what is the outcome? So US is one of those countries which is not even close to achieving the emission reduction targets. Not even 1/3 of the emission reduction target which has been set for 2030, not even 1/3 of that has been achieved. The emissions are increasing. It is one of the highest per capita emitters of the greenhouse gases. So they are not going to achieve the INDC which they have put forward. Then withdrawal, the impact. What is the now impact? What you can divide is in the short run. What will be the short run impact? The impact on funding, right? Then impact on emissions, impact on climate change. These will be the impact. And then the long run. What are going to be the long run impacts? Long run. Principle of CBDR, that is going to be impacted. Under each of these points, write a subparagraph as well. That is very important. Then after that, multilateralism will be impacted. Okay, the faith in conventions, goals of conventions, nobody will try to achieve that. So this is something that you describe. After that, in the later part of the body itself, and then in the conclusion part, you talk about the way forward. So what is the way forward? The global south has to take the lead and initiate climate actions, and the global south has to ensure that there are areas of convergences, achievement of their own NDCs to ensure that they are not suffering more. Now here also list the reports, quote the reports. Which are the reports? State of climate in Asia. In Asia report. This is released by whom? This is released by World Meteorological Organization, WMO. So those kind of reports you have to list, and that is when you can substantiate and authenticate your answer as well. Okay. Now, coming to the next article. China's moves must recast India's critical minerals push. Now you see, China's Ministry of Commerce expanded the export control list. Export control list in the sense that those items which will be, there will be certain amount of controls in the amount and the quantity and the countries where you are exporting them to. So most of the minerals, they come under the category of critical minerals, which have been put under the export control list. Now, China has been smart enough for this in this particular area for more than a couple of decades now, because China has got a substantial reserve of critical minerals. Now, China sees that these critical minerals, if let's suppose US imports them and utilizes the minerals for manufacturing of semiconductor chips, batteries, advanced tech, AI chips, etc. Now that is going to be disadvantageous to China. So that is why China, in order to maintain the monopoly and the overwhelming presence of its electronic industry in that area, China imposes an export control. So here, the expansion of export control list, where substances like tungsten, gallium, magnesium, beryllium, hafnium, and an isotope of lithium, that is lithium-6, and other materials, they have been put into it. Now, what are the implications of that? The global supply chain will take a hit. Global supply chain will take a hit. How? Because when you have the scarcity of the materials which are required for manufacturing of electric vehicles or manufacturing of batteries, then obviously the supply of those automobiles will suffer. When the supply of the crucial parts and the automobiles, they suffer, that leads to a kind of inflationary pressure on the market. That is never good for the market. Oftentimes it can lead to the loss of jobs as well in many of the service sector industry. So global supply chains will take the immediate hit. Then after that, the critical systems like battery, electric vehicles, EV tech, batteries, semiconductor chips, right, which are very vital from the manufacturing of an automobile to manufacturing of a mobile phone. These chips are almost irreplaceable nowadays. So the entire ecosystem will be impacted. New research activities in many areas will be impacted because of the reduced supply of these materials. So that is the implication of it. Now, India has been actively seeking to diversify its import sources of the critical minerals in order to reduce the dependence from China. Because it has been realized ever since the COVID days that when China, and let's suppose the relations of China with the rest of the world are not on the perfect terms, then the supply chains take a hit, the export market from China takes a hit. Then other than that, if let's suppose your relation with China is not good, obviously there will be trade restriction and that can also impact the sector. So India has been working actively for a few years in order to rejuvenate its critical mineral sector. But not much has happened. So what is the situation that India is witnessing or looking at? First of all, India has carried out various measures like identification of 30 critical minerals which are essential for national security in terms of development of AI chips, in terms of development of neural networks in many of the cases, in terms of development of communication technology. So all those minerals which are required for battery tech, etc., they have been identified as essential for national security by the Ministry of Mines. Then setting up of Kabil. That is Khanij Bidesh India Limited. That is, the acronym of that is Kabil. Now, this Khanij Bidesh India Limited, why has that been set up? In order to ensure overseas investment. That yes, if we don't have those critical minerals, maybe Argentina has. We have the lithium triangle in Argentina, Bolivia and Chile. Isn't it? You have a lot of these critical minerals which are also to be found in the region of Central Africa, around Cameroon, etc. So, overseeing or basically taking a look at those overseas resources and wherever required, ensuring investment so that you get a better deal, you get a better share of those resources in order to ensure a reliable, affordable and efficient supply of the critical minerals for a long term as well. Something that ONGC Videsh Limited or OVL does for oil exploration. That whenever, for example, India was interested in the Sakhalin Basin near the Kamchatka Peninsula for the exploration of oil in eastern part of Russia. So, the investment happened from ONGC Videsh Limited. You need to invest in order to extract and explore the minerals and the materials as well. So, for that purpose, Khanij Bidesh India Limited has been set up. Then, Mines and Minerals Amendment Act 2023, that lifted the restrictions on many of the critical minerals which were earlier listed under the atomic resources. So when they were listed under atomic resources, there was a greater amount of imposition of restriction in terms of their exploration, the extraction, the sale, everything. Now, many of these restrictions have been lifted. Okay. Now, introduction of exploration licenses, this has also been done. Because earlier what used to be the case, let's suppose I want to, or I'm interested in the mineral reserve which is found in this area. First of all, I have to explore also, I have to mine also, and I will be the one who will be selling that also and giving the revenue to the government. Now, what this meant, many of the newer industries could not come up in the sector because either you have an expertise in exploration or you have an expertise in extraction. Unless and until you are a very large conglomerate like the Adanis or, for example, the government public sector undertaking. Generally, the smaller startups, the newcomers, they don't have an efficiency in all these sectors. So that is why, in order to ensure that sector experts, they enter into the field of exploration, the government had introduced exploration license, where you explore, right? And license will be provided for that itself. So you can utilize your expertise there. That would lead to greater efficiency. But despite all of these measures, there has been a very lukewarm response from the private sector. In a way, there has been a lack of private investment. Time and time again, when the auctions are being held, it is found that the auction or the eventual reward of the tender goes to the public sector undertakings because the private sector is not investing. Now, that is bad news. Foreign direct or the foreign investment is also not coming into the critical mineral sector, due to which the critical mineral exploration and extraction has been stymied and stagnant. It was only a couple of years ago, that is in 2023, where the news hit the roof that lithium reserves have been found in the Riyasi district in Jammu Kashmir, something that UPSC candidates rectify even till this day. But after that, no further development or news story as a follow-up you would have observed. It has been restricted up till that itself. So that is why private participation is a must, because private investment will bring about the required technology, resources, and the wherewithal to explore and extract more minerals. Right? So here, what is the way forward that India should adopt? Because understand, critical minerals are the requirement of the future. 10 years, 20 years down the line, the requirement of these minerals are going to be very high because electric vehicles, electric technology, battery storage, that is going to be paramount. As the world seeks to fight the impact of climate change, we have to move to renewables, and for that, the critical minerals are a must. So what is it that the government should do further? There should be a further fiscal incentive to the players participating in mineral exploration, right? So greater amount of fiscal incentive like tax breaks, etc. you can provide. Secondly, robust geological surveys. You see, one of the issues, one of the problems that the mineral sector faces is many of the private players, they do not have enough amount of idea about where the minerals are present. In general, our exploration by the geological survey is not very abundant in terms of data parameter, that what is the proportion of the minerals there, what is the extent of the mineral there, what is the ore mixture. So there we need a greater amount of study and a better equipment, better experts to be hired, so that the entire geological mapping can be done in an efficient manner. If a person, let's suppose, what is the situation right now, that in this large terrain, I have told you that there can be minerals. Now, you invest millions of dollars and you find that the mineral is not economically viable, too much of mixture, too much of impurity. So you are reluctant to invest. Next time when I say that invest in this area, you will be reluctant to do so. But if I tell you that if you invest in exploration and extraction in this particular region, you will be able to generate this much amount of mineral and extract that, you will be able to generate this much amount of revenue, obviously you will be more keen to invest. So robust geological surveys are required. But what the article also argues, that just like the semiconductor sector, semiconductor industry which India seeks to revitalize, just like that, the fiscal support, the capital support that is provided to semiconductors, similar kind of support needs to be provided upfront for the mineral exploration sector as well. They need to be given that fiscal incentive. Okay? So upfront capital support, particularly for exploration. Provide them with a kind of subsidy of sort. Only then we can have the utilization of these minerals and a kind of an independence and independent strategic policy in terms of our future technologies and critical technologies, which are vital for the national defense and the national security as well. Okay, so what have we seen in this article? What is the action taken by China? Extension of the export control list, how India as a country, India will be impacted. What are the progresses that India has made or the steps that India has taken in terms to explore more critical minerals? But still, what are the required or what are the steps required to be taken going ahead into the future? So take a look at the practice question. Analyze the developments in the sector of critical minerals in India and suggest a way forward. So here, what do you write? It is a 10-marker question. So you have to write in brief. So in the intro, you talk about the relevance or the importance of critical minerals. Okay? That how going ahead into the future, critical minerals are going to be very important for battery tech, semiconductor, storage, renewables, everything. Right? So they are a very vital part of the global production hub. Then in the body, talk about the steps taken. Steps taken. Then talk about present scenario. What is the present scenario? Present scenario is that there is a very lukewarm private sector response. The private sector does not respond or is not investing, is not participating. Then after that, talk about what is the way forward. Okay? Then talk about, for example, here in the present scenario, when you're talking about the lack of investment from the private sector, there itself you can talk about the lack of enough geological data or proper geological mapping. That is what you can talk about there itself. Then in the conclusion, conclusion is where relevance for strategic independence. Like that, summarize the answer, write the answer, and secure marks. Okay? This is how you can write the answer. Do try writing it on your own. I urge you to do so. Okay? Now, then the oligarchy we see today. Now, this is an interesting article talking about oligarchy. Now, why is this article in news, or why is oligarchy as a term in news? Because of this image. This picture, which was taken at the swearing-in ceremony of Donald Trump. Now, this picture conveyed many things. First of all, if you take a look at the people who are standing in line and who were basically besides Donald Trump, all you could see was multi-billionaires. From Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos to Sundar Pichai to Tim Cook to Mark Zuckerberg. The entire oath-taking ceremony was hogged by these multi-billionaires. So that raised the entire issue of oligarchy. Now, oligarchy as a terminology was for the first time discussed by the Greek philosopher Aristotle. Now, if you take a look at the bare definition of oligarchy, it is a form of government in which the power is vested. All the power is vested in a few persons in a dominant class or a certain group, elite, so to say. So, government by the few. This goes antithetical to the entire aspect or the DNA of democracy. What is democracy? government of the people, for the people, and by the people. This is government of the few, for the few, and by the few. That is the case of oligarchy. Now, you see, this oligarchy is not completely black and white. Historically, from the time of the Greeks, oligarchy has been prevalent, right? And when you talk about oligarchy through the ages, see, Aristotle said that ruling of a wealthy few for corrupt and unjust purposes with that of aristocracy or upper elite class. So that is how oligarchy functions. But through the ages, oligarchy has always been prevalent. Even when you read history, in Indian history also, you will observe that during the time of Delhi Sultanate, there was an oligarchy. Right? You had individuals like Balban who broke the power of those oligarchs in many of the cases during the Delhi Sultanate. Then in the time of Mughals also oligarchy followed. Then in the later British period also, the Marxist historians, they allege of an oligarchy which was present closer to the crown and closer to the imperial interest. But if we take a look across the globe, you can take a look at, for example, the Roman Empire had many different examples of individuals vying for greater power, the rich individuals. In more modern era, if you think about it, Philippines is one of those countries which is said to be run by a few powerful family. Then China is where the term became very prominent also, because few of the families, they retained power through the ages, through multiple decades, high positions in the CPC and also in the government. So there also the power was restricted to the few. Then more recently in Russia, where people who are supposedly close to Putin, Vladimir Putin, they are the ones who have a say in running of the government, and also they have better favorable terms in terms of oil exploration, in terms of industrial licenses, etc. So that is the entire context of oligarchy. Now, oligarchy per se, where there is a greater influence of the few individuals, that in itself is not bad. But what the implications of it can be, that is disastrous. Because the few rich individuals, they can always end up shaping the government policy. And when you shape the government policy, or when you are influential in the government circles, then that will obviously be benefiting you. For example, US had set up DOGE, that is Department of Government Efficiency, under Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. Now Vivek Ramaswamy has exited from that DOGE. Now Elon Musk immediately announced that the citizens have to face certain hardships because the government is going to reduce the spending on citizen welfare. So think about it. Elon Musk and his organization themselves, they are responsible for contributing millions of dollars to the Trump campaign. So obviously, they would expect something in return. So the political contributions that happen, the political donations that happen by the rich corporate class, they will expect something in return. And that is where it can damage the entire welfareism of the state. At the same time, it can always increase the inequality, isn't it? Because the rules will be always favoring the rich magnates and the rich political class. So they will be impacted as well. Then other than that, you will also have an impact in terms of the welfareism of the state. Welfareism. So the impact of oligarchy is substantial, right? But then there are arguments about the coexistence of democratic ideals and oligarchy. Now, at the time of Aristotle had the luxury to argue that democracy is much better state and much better form of governance as compared to oligarchy. That was a luxury. In today's day and age, many of the thinkers, political thinkers and sociologists, they argue that democracy and oligarchy, they actually go hand in hand. It is inevitable. Why it is inevitable? Because due to democratic ideals and under the provisions of democratic ideals, division of labor is very important. So division of labor will happen, due to which there will be certain people who will wield greater power. So those who will wield greater power in the society, they will always either come to power themselves or they would try to influence the people who are in power. So democracy and oligarchy are coexistent in today's day and age, right? So that is the reality of the world order that we are living in. So how do we navigate a way forward in this? The navigation has to happen with very stringent parameters. First of all, when we talk about electoral funding, so that funding has to be made very transparent. Funding. Right? While lobbying is absolutely legal in US, but then again, that imposes a kind of a private interest behind bringing about a certain administration. In countries like India, that funding is not at all transparent. So that funding needs to be very, very transparent. Second, ideals of welfareism and a welfare state is what the countries have to stick to. Welfareism. The aim of the government has to be, regardless of whosoever is in power, aim has to be to reduce inequality. As soon as inequality in the society is addressed, the entire concept of oligarchy goes out of the window, because more people wield greater amount of influence. So, reduction of inequality. Okay? That is another step which can be taken. So, when we talk about fight against oligarchy or the issue of oligarchy, we have to think about from the Indian perspective. Indian perspective also, before every elections, the state or the central election, you have a large scale funding by the corporate class. So, make that public. Right? What is the funding? We are still a long way away from that, but that should be the way to go. And our entire endeavor has to be to ensure that the lower strata of our society, that is uplifted. Whatever support and handholding is required by the government should be done. Only in that case will you take decisions, will you craft policies for the welfare of the population. And also, one of the ways in which you can fight oligarchy is to take mass consensus. In whichever policy action that you are taking, public opinion should be sought, so that the roots and the ideals of democracy, they go deep, right? So that is where awakening, mass awakening or awareness rather, as well as public opinion, this will defy or resist the penetration of oligarchy. Okay? Now, then another article about cross-pathy. That is the government encouraging cross-pathy? Now, why is this in news? So, this article has been in news owing to Maharashtra Food and Drug Administration's order, which has in a recent directive allowed homeopathic practitioners who have completed a certificate course, obviously, to prescribe allopathic medicines. Right? Now, this order is more of a kind of a directive towards the chemists, the pharmacists that you see, that they are allowed to entertain such prescriptions written by the homeopathic doctors, even if they are prescribing allopathic drugs. So a person of a certain area of expertise, if they are prescribing drugs of other area of expertise, that is the concept of cross-pathy. So what is this cross-pathy? It is when a medical professional prescribes medications or practices medicine from a system other than the one they are registered for. It is considered a legal matter and a form of professional misconduct. Now, this is an issue which was earlier raised in the Bombay High Court as well and went up to the Supreme Court as well. Supreme Court has taken a very firm stance. It has imposed a ban on this cross administration of allopathic medicine. That has happened. Now, because of that, the Supreme Court held him being not qualified to practice allopathy. So, hence, guilty of negligence. So, that is where Supreme Court stance is very clear. But still you will find at the central government level as well, at the state government level as well, the various different governments, they are trying to, in a way, encourage the practitioners of Unani or the entire Ayush system, Ayurveda, Unani, homeopathic systems, to have the prescription even for allopathy. Now, why is it that the governments are trying to do so? Why is it that it is seen, it is perceived that the government is promoting crossopathy? The single pointed reason is lack of professionals, lack of doctors. We don't have enough doctors in our country, as simple as that. Because we don't have enough doctors, so how do you fulfill or bridge the gap? Those individuals who have the homeopathic degree, let them take a bridge course and let them provide medicine. Now, that can be very risky a proposition. That is about putting multiple lives at risk. Many individuals, they do not have the immediate impact of consuming medicines. Maybe they have consumed certain medicine and the body will be impacted 5 months down the line. They would not be able to pinpoint why their body has deteriorated. So that is where the impact is very long run. But everything is because of a simple fact, lack of doctors. So what is the way forward? Simple, more medical practitioners, more amount of medical colleges need to be established. Training of and upskilling of professionals, paramedical staff needs to be done, right? Those of them who are let's suppose in the sector of the Ayush, that is Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, all of these medicines. Now, those individuals there in their field, greater research has to be carried out so that these become a trusted school of medicinal approach rather than being called a quack, right? So there needs to be more research and investment into the curriculum, the development of empirical data about how homeopathy can, if it can treat the individuals or if it is not able to treat the individuals. So that is where more R&D, more skilling and upskilling of the doctors, greater number of medical colleges which need to be established, and more training of paramedical staff. Okay? Now, then we come to, so here in this article, the Supreme Court judgment is important. The terminology of crossopathy is important. Then we come to certain articles which are relevant for your prelims. Having said that, those of you who are interested in shaping up your prelims preparation for this year or even the year next. So today we are going to come out with a 4-month schedule which you can follow. If you are disciplined enough, that will give you enough time, enough space to not only complete the syllabus, but ensure a holistic coverage of the syllabus and clear the prelims with great luxury. So do take a look into the YouTube channel. We shall be uploading the video and shall be updated in the Telegram group as well. Okay. Now, let us take a look at some of the articles. National Health Mission has curbed several public health concerns, says the Centre's report. Now, Centre has released a report as per which the National Health Mission has significantly reduced the maternal mortality rate by almost 83%, then reduced the infant mortality rate from an earlier figure of more than 30, around 39, to the present day figure of 28, which was experienced in 2020, right? From 39 to 28, which is massive. So there have been improvements which have been carried out even in the case of tuberculosis, sickle cell anemia, etc. Now, this National Health Mission, which was initiated around 2013, brings about various different health initiatives under one umbrella. Now, what are the goals of this National Health Mission that is going to be relevant? Reduce the total fertility rate to the replacement rate, that is 2.1. And the National Family Health Survey has also indicated that we are achieving this. The total fertility rate is close to 2.0 in many parts of the country. Infant mortality rate survivability of the young ones is very vital to chart out the demographic transition of a society. So infant mortality rate reduce it to 25 per 1,000 live births, aligning with the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So reduce it to 25 per 1,000 live births, we are at 28. Maternal mortality rate, reduce it to 1 per 1,000 live births. Bring down the malaria cases to less than 1 per 1,000 population. Prevent and reduce anemia in women in the age bracket of 15 to 49 years. More than 50% of our women population, they are suffering from anemic conditions, due to which the children who are born, they are also suffering from issues like undernourishment, malnutrition, stunting, wasting, all of these. So that is also a target. Bring down cases and mortality due to tuberculosis by half. So these goals, ideally, even for your mains examination, prepare a list of the factoid, mention these goals. This will be vital even for the mains and even for the prelims exam. You can expect a multiple choice question like which of these are the goals set up by the National Health Mission, and there can be a twist or a sentence which can be framed in an incorrect manner. So do look out for those kind of questions. Okay. Then Center announces a hike in MSP for jute by rupees 315 a quintal. Now, what is the increase in MSP? Not important for your exam. From here, what UPSC will always tend to ask, which is the case in the future, in the past as well. Conditions required for the growth of jute. What are the conditions, the geographical conditions required for the growth of jute? So jute, which grows in very fertile alluvial soil, fresh fertile alluvial soil, or what is also referred to as the Khadar soil. Now, that is the region where jute will tend to grow, in the Khadar soil. Okay. Khadar is the newer alluvium. Now, it grows in regions where the rainfall is very high. It is sown in the months preceding the monsoon. So even the pre-monsoon showers need to provide it with around 50 to 55 centimeter of rainfall. Overall rainfall requirement is to the tune of 120 to 150 centimeter per year. So that is why it is grown in the more rainier areas and the floodplains in particular, because in the floodplains you find the fertile soil. Then humidity levels around 70 to 90%. That is vital for the jute as a crop. Temperature from 24 to around 35 and even up till 38 degrees Celsius, the temperature is conducive for jute. Soil, light sandy and clay loams with proper aeration. And because jute as a crop drains the fertility and nutrition of the soil quite significantly and massively every year, that is why it is preferably grown in those areas where fresh alluvium is laid every year by the flooding action. Okay, so the regions where you have the growth of jute, that also becomes vital. So you have the regions of West Bengal, which is the largest producer of jute in India. India is amongst the largest producers of jute in the world. Then you have the region of the Brahmaputra plains in Assam. Then eastern part of Bihar, around the region where river Ganga enters into West Bengal, parts of Jharkhand, parts of Odisha, and parts of coastal Andhra Pradesh. So these are the regions where you will find the growth of jute. That is what you have to concentrate for your prelims preparation. Then, India's maritime sector needs investment of $1 trillion by 2047. Now, this was a statement which was issued by the Secretary, Union Ministry of Ports. Now, here, while the article talks about the requirement of investment to develop green hydrogen capabilities in the ports, greater handling capacity in the ports, etc., but there is a mention of an interesting line, that is Hong Kong Convention on Ship Recycling. So for your prelims, this becomes vital. Right? Question will not be framed that what is the total amount of investment required, $200 billion, $300 billion, no. Question will be asked on what is this Hong Kong Convention. So Hong Kong Convention is aimed at ensuring that ships, when being recycled after reaching the end of their life cycle, they do not pose any unnecessary risk to the human health. Because you see, when you have the ships being dismantled at various different shipyards, now those release many of the toxic fumes in the air. At the same time, they cause land pollution and land degradation. Release of substances like asbestos, they are carcinogenic. They can cause cancer. So that is why this Hong Kong Convention, which will enter into force this year, becomes important. So Hong Kong Convention adoption on 15th of May 2009, entry into force basically 26 June 2025. Okay, so here two of the international organizations and conventions are have been vital in framing this Hong Kong Convention. So which are those two organizations? International Labour Organization and the parties to the Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Substances. So here ILO. Why ILO is involved in this? Because it is in the ship-breaking yards where the laborers, they get impacted by these lifestyle diseases. That is why ILO gets involved, and the Basel Convention. Basel Convention is where you have various different hazardous substances, right? Even waste, for example, battery chemicals, etc. They are regulated so that they are not transported into developing and underdeveloped nations and simply dumped there, causing environmental degradation. So that is what the Hong Kong Convention is going to bring into activity. This brings about immense opportunity for India as well, because India can bring about the best practices of ship dismantling and can become a hub of the ship dismantling industry. That will initiate a kind of a circular economy, create a lot of jobs in India as well. Okay. Now, then India's rice exports defy curbs, hold steady in 2024. Now you see, in 2024, the amount of rice exports or the export of rice, there were various curbs issued by the government, owing to the fact that the month of June and July experienced erratic rainfall patterns leading to dry condition, at the same time flooding in many regions, due to which fresh kharif crop of rice could not be planted. Now, those curbs were completely removed by the end of the year, and that witnessed a surge in the basmati rice exports as well as the non-basmati rice exports. Now, most of the curbs were put on the non-basmati sector because that was supposed to impact the common population. Having said that, country's rice exports are close to around 17.8 million metric tons in 2024. It is slightly lower from what was the case in 2023. So that is the trend that you have to take a look into for your prelims. So rice exports in 2023 was higher, slightly higher as compared to 2024. Compared to 2024. So that is a fact which is important, and why the curbs on exports were put into place. Okay, so that is what is relevant. So that brings us to the end of the discussion for all the important articles that are present in the international edition of the newspaper today. Take a look at those questions which will be put up on the Telegram channel shortly, and do try to write the answers for the questions given above as well. If you have liked the analysis, if you have liked the content of the session, please do ensure that you put a like, share and the subscribe button, and give the feedback in the comment section as well. Till we meet again tomorrow, take care, goodbye, thank you.